And good evening and welcome to the very first live screening of Fracking Nightmare. This is a show that makes absolutely no pretense of sitting on any fence, just like the mainstream media really. The only difference is that we're the other side of the fence. Well, we're running a few minutes behind original schedule thanks to the technicians here getting some last-minute details sorted out, but hopefully we've got it sorted, we're up and running, and we've got a hell of a show for you tonight. We've got some guests to introduce to you later on. We've got Geza Tajani, otherwise known as Geza Frackman, who right now is just a couple of days into his walk to London. So we'll be catching up with him and looking at his experiences on the road. Later on in the evening, we'll be talking to Julie Wasmer of East Kent Against Fracking and looking at the remarkable achievements that that group has had in terms of getting their MP to do a complete 180 in his stance on the fracking issue. Now, I'm assuming that certainly for this evening, the first show, the vast majority of people watching actually know something about fracking. But hopefully, as the weeks go on, we'll reach out to a wider and wider audience, and particularly people who perhaps don't fully appreciate the magnitude of this abomination that the British government wants to unleash beneath the British people. So just to make it very clear that the whole of the country here is pretty much under threat, if we can look at on the screen here, what we're seeing is a map. The green shaded areas are all areas which the British Geological and British Geographical Societies identify as potentially viable shale gas or coal bed methane deposits. 64% of England, and as you can see in north of the border there, an area right across the central belt of Scotland. All the areas in brown are already licensed. And in many cases, there are now applications in for the respective companies to get their bits in the ground and start exploratory drilling. In a couple of cases, in South Yorkshire and in East Humberside, they've actually managed to get their bits in the ground and drill an exploratory well without anybody realizing what was going on. Well, hopefully that won't be happening ever again. As awareness grows around the country, there are more and more groups springing up, independent groups, autonomous groups, monitoring the planning applications, monitoring the various companies, and then getting the word out of what is being planned to be unleashed beneath them. Well, the government are mounting their pro-fracking campaign, and of course, George Osborne, the Chancellor, is the latest cheerleader. If we can pull up on screen here, we have him a few days ago stating we need to get fracking. I would love to get it going in the UK. Well, George, there's a ever increasing percentage of this country that is determined to ensure that you don't get an opportunity to frack anywhere near us. Unfortunately, George, of course, has the support of his beloved leader, David Cameron. And David Cameron, of course, has the hand of a certain Lord John Brown up a very delicate orifice, pulling his strings. Lord John Brown, of course, the former chairman and chief executive officer of BP, whose mantra when he was head of that company was profit above all else, leaving quite a significant body count behind him. Since 2001, he has been sitting in the House of Lords. He was appointed into the Lords by Tony Blair after Tony had reconstituted the upper house. And after having to leave the role of chairman and chief executive officer due to various corporate and personal scandals, which we won't be going into tonight, Lord John Brown disappeared from the media for a little while to return in 2010 when he was appointed to David Cameron's cabinet on the instructions of Francis Maude, a very senior MP who also happens to be the MP for the constituency in which Balcombe sits. So having appointed him to the cabinet, he takes on the role of special advisor for business ethos. Yet, Lord John Brown is at the heart of the corruption that is associated with this disgusting industry. Lord John Brown is the chairman of Quadrilla, the company that drilled and fracked in the Fylde Peninsula in 2011 and triggered the two seismic events. The first one on April the 1st at 2.5 on the Richter scale, and the second one on May the 27th at a slightly lower 1.3. Nonetheless, we'll be talking in a little while to Gazer Frackman, and he will tell us about his personal experiences of those seismic events when the Earth certainly did move for him. If we go back and look at the screen here a second, what we see on this map here, and this is from the excellent website of Frack Off, and what we see here are the markers in the areas of the country that are being specifically targeted right now. Tonight we're going to focus on the northwest and on Kent. A little bit of a mention about Borkum, of course, that's very significant in the scheme of things. But over the coming weeks, we'll be looking at every other area around the country, and hopefully you will keep us informed of what is going on in your area so that we can share it on a wider basis. Now, for those of you who are watching who don't know what fracking is, then very simply, and we'll go into more detail over the coming weeks, but very simply, this is high volume, high pressure, hydraulic fracturing in unconventional geology. And any attempt by the British government or anybody else to persuade people that this is a technology that's been around for 50 years and other wells have been fracked in the UK, they are either conflating or lying. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and suggest that they are simply conflating due to their own lack of knowledge of how this industry works. High volume, high pressure, hydraulic fracturing. The high volume accounting for anything from 2 million gallons of fresh water upwards. The pressure somewhere in the region of 7,500, 8,500 pounds per square inch. The longest ever frack job ran for 111 days. I don't think we'll see too much of that in the UK, but nonetheless, we're talking some very significant runs. The latest person to add their weight to the shale gas agenda is none other than Jack Straw. And this is from today's comic, The Sun, and a little editorial here. Back to frack, Ed. Labour grandee Jack Straw has called on Ed Miliband to stand up to Green campaigners and back fracking. The former Foreign Secretary insisted shale gas will bring huge benefits. Well, not to us, Jack. Mr. Straw said the risks are manageable. And of course, how would you know that, Jack? Have you been and visited any of the frack sites around the world? I don't think so. You're simply trotting out the same script that everybody else who's met with Francis Egan or Andrew Austin. Jack says we've got to face down those people who decide this is the next thing to protest about. They have no interest in the economy and people's prosperity. First of all, Jack, I think you'll find there's an increasing number of people who understand exactly how you and your colleagues in the Labour government destroyed this economy and managed to hand over the economy when we were 82% of GDP in debt. I think more and more people understand that the way in which we get out of this mess is by abolishing the fractional reserve system, but that's for another day. So what we have is a situation in the UK where every one of the major parties, and even some of the minor parties like UKIP, are pro-fracking. The only exception are the Greens. But let's have a look at one of the comments from UKIP member for the European Parliament for East Midlands. This is Roger Helmer, who said, I have absolutely no sympathy for the rent-a-mob protesters, the swampies and the Occupy movement and the anti-capitalists and eco-freaks who have sought to hijack the Borkum protest. Mr. Helmer, anytime you want a public debate, which of course you won't, but you are very welcome to give me a call and I will simply present the facts. I will ask everyone to come with their iPhones so that they can absolutely search in real time and prove that you will be literally making it up as you go along, just like every other pro-fracking speaker that I have seen to date. You went on in your comments. Oh, no, you didn't. Yeah, you did. You said there is no truth behind scare stories promoted by green groups and Russian and Middle East oil and gas exporters about potential environmental effects from fracking. Well, Mr. Helmer, just like Jack Straw, I doubt you have been anywhere near the fracked gas fields of the US, of Canada, or of Australia. And as for your attempt to demonize the protesters, then one of the things that I would observe from my 29 days out of the 66 of the Balkan blockade, the people at Balkan represented every part of the social, political, and philosophical spectrum. This is an issue that unites people from all across society. It unites those people who have done their research and they understand that this is an abomination and it will destroy the country's precious water supplies. But as for you demonizing the protectors as swampies, let's meet one of them. This is Nana Frack. Nana Frack, the video? Sorry, we have a little bit of a hic there.
Yes,
So you guys are from the village?
No, we're from Chichester.
Chichester?
Yeah, near Portsmouth as well, where we've got that going on. But we've been coming down. Nan's a regular here. Oh,
Yeah?
very good.
So you've come down every weekend?
No, and during the week,
Yeah, fantastic.
don't you? You bring chocolates and biscuits and crisps.
Yep. Well, what I want to do is, you see, I just want to be able to put out on YouTube so that I can show the rest of the country what a terrorist looks like.
She's on Facebook, on Fracking Sussex.
Yeah.
Stop the gate in front of the police.
Fantastic, because, you know, the media is trying to portray that everybody down here is, you know, an extremist or crazy. 91.
91. And there's
91.
5 generations in our family.
Five generations here?
Yeah, alive. Yeah.
Yeah, but
The other day, they were the other day. When we
fantastic.
Wednesday.
Thank you. What is your name, ma'am?
Joan.
Joan.
Free today.
Joan, well, thanks for coming down to Balcombe here. That's fantastic. Thank you. And hopefully you bring the rest of your friends too.
Yeah, we're trying.
Excellent.
Can I take a picture, Nana
Thanks a lot.
Frack? Can I take a picture?
Yeah, if you want to.
Thank you.
Well, that's Nana Frack. I think she was quite possibly the oldest of the protectors, and as you heard, she was there on a very regular basis with her family. But there were many other people, many of the people there were retirees, and of course, because it was the summer, it was the school holidays, many people that were there with their families. And it was a wonderful carnival atmosphere. Of course, the Balkan blockade was incredibly successful. The Balkan blockade slowed Quadrilla down to the point where they were not able to run their flow tests. In other words, they were not able to frack. So Quadrilla had to vacate the site of Balkan by September the 28th. So the vast majority of people from the camp then went home, except the hardy few. And on the screen here, we have a hardy few. Oh, let's go back there. We have the hardy few. And this is the Balkan vigilant groups. And what they are doing is they're making sure that all activity on the site, if there is any, is monitored. And that unlike when Quadrilla were able to move their rig onto the site, the first truck onto the site in July unopposed, that won't happen again. Now, they survived the storm last night, and I hope that I'm sure the locals in Balcombe have taken them some hot meals today. Meanwhile, one of the people that was at Balcombe for pretty much every weekend during the course of the blockade was a guy by the name of Geyser Frackman. And what you see on the screen here is the PEDAL, the Petroleum Exploration and Development License that is held by Quadrilla, which covers the Fylde Peninsula, which is effectively the whole of the area surrounding Blackpool. So this is the area where Quadrilla drilled and fracked in 2011. So now I think we have Geyser online. In fact, Geyser, on the screen, we have a picture of you in your special travel clothes. How are you doing, my friend?
Fantastic, thanks. A little bit tired, 1 or 2 blisters, but okay.
A little bit tired. Well, how far have you covered so far?
I don't know, about 70 miles, something like that.
And how far you got to go?
So about another 180.
And your ultimate goal is?
It's Downing Street. Yep, 10 Downing Street. I'm going to hand a letter into our favourite Prime Minister, and he's going to have 12 questions in there, asking him one basic one is why he thinks he has the right, as an elected Prime Minister, well, supposedly because he's in a coalition, to say that he wants to make Blackpool the fracking capital of Europe.
So what was it that got you interested in the subject? Because you don't have an oil field background. So how did you find out about the fracking issue?
Well, yeah, it was basically that my house was damaged back in 1st of April, the first earthquake. Feeling the earthquake, it damaged my house, and about 4 months later, I found that it was quadrilla that caused the earthquake. Like most people that get into it, I went onto the internet, found everything, just typed in fracking, and as you know, there's vast amounts of information, and most of it is against, well, nearly all of it is against fracking.
But when you say your house was damaged, Gazer, in what way was it damaged? Because I've read the reports from, I think it's Professor Robinson from the Durham Energy Institute, who says that it's not possible for any properties to have been damaged in these earthquakes.
Yeah, Peter Stowns actually said the same thing as well. How a scientist can just deduce that with no evidence whatsoever and say that somebody's house, when they didn't experience it, when they haven't seen the evidence, I've invited Peter Stowns, I said on the radio station, to come onto my house and he can check the damage to my home. I've got cracks in the walls, cracks inside, cracks around my doors. My door doesn't open properly. We've got pins coming out of the ceiling, plaster pins that don't slide out. There has to be movement. So if those people want evidence, then come to my home. Say to me that it didn't happen.
And you're not the only one, are you, either, really?
No, the various other ones. See, another problem is, because it took so long for them to admit to it, well, they didn't admit to it still. Till this day, Quadrilla have not admitted that they caused the earthquake.
But a report has been published that says that they were most probably responsible.
They were. As simple as they were. The evidence is there. People felt it. The earthquake. I never had any damage to my house the day before. That I felt the earthquake in the early hours, and there was damage the day after. So I got onto into the fracking from that point onwards. The more I found out about it from the Tyndall report, I was lucky enough to actually look at the New York moratorium, where the two senators was questioning experts, real experts, not puppet professors and sham surveys that our government keep looking at, and the puppet professors that keep, like Peter Stiles and the guy you just mentioned now, they keep rolling out. How they can look people in the camera and put years and years of research, and their names to this, I do not know, because it will come out, the truth will come out, and these people's professional stand-in will be devastated, and rightly so. And
so you're the founder of Frack Free Filed. I have to be very careful how I say that. And which is one of I think 5 groups in the Blackpool area, 5 anti-fracking groups in the Blackpool area.
We've got Frack Free Blackpool, GAF, we've got REEF, RAF, Residence Action, Foul Fracking. There's new ones coming up as well. I could reel them all off. I've got Freckleton, Garstang, Longridge, Blackburn, Accrington, Fleetwood, Wrexham, Wigan.
And this is, of course, the strategy, isn't it? This is the strategy, to have multiple groups all operating separately, independently, networking, all bringing different skills into the equation.
That's definitely right, because they've all got different dynamics, and they're all coming from the fracking companies and the government from different angles, and they just can't cope with it. And the main thing is we're doing it legally and peacefully. Excellent. And I don't think any of these companies, these major companies, have dealt with the way that we work. And there's no master plan. It's just the way we're working, but individually, but united.
Excellent. So, what did you take away from your time at Balcombe, Gazer?
Unity, sheer will to stop this, and the fact that I saw the police being used as an army. The last time I saw what was going on down in Balcombe, I was a young man, and it was when Margaret Thatcher was breaking up the unions, using the police as Thatcher's army. I saw exactly the same thing down there. There's hundreds of police being used. It cost £2.6 million. To police, between 6.2 and £4 million to police that, which is disgusting. Some of the police were apparently off with stress. I have never seen such peaceful people in my life. They were singing, dancing, and it was only the time it was broken up with violence is when the police were coming in and bringing it. I even saw one empty truck with police around it one time. That's how pathetic it got.
Well, I heard that at least two Sussex police officers had specifically requested not to be assigned to Borkum because they had done their own research and actually understood why it was that the protectors were there. And I would have to say that in the time that I was at Borkum, the Sussex police, with one or two notable exceptions, but the Sussex police conducted themselves with tremendous restraint. I noticed that the policing attitude changed when other police forces, such as the Met and Thames Valley and Hampshire, I even saw Devon and Cornwall police there, the Welsh police were there, Wiltshire police, and Kent. But when some of these other police forces were there, it was almost as though they'd been briefed that they were coming up against Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, like I said, it was... there was another member from RAF I came down the first week, and then a member from RAF came down the second week. And one particular protector called Foxy, the Silver Fox, was arrested right in front of him. And they were just chatting by the campfire and was dragged into a van. And the shock in his face was mirrored exactly the way I felt the week before. I was stunned into silence. I could not believe what I was seeing in this day and age.
Well, and the other thing, Gazer, is that when everyone who was arrested was taken down to Crawley Police Station, they were being interviewed either by CID or maybe Special Branch, and apparently they were all being asked the same question. Who's your leader? Tell us who your leader is. And of course, the beauty of this movement is that there are no leaders. Everyone's their own leader. There's so many different groups all operating autonomously. There is no central coordination here. This is going to be a campaign like no other.
Well, what it is just there's a will, right? When you become a parent, you have a duty to look after your children. And when you see that being a threat or a threat coming against, and that their futures and the health of the planet, that they're going to be, that we're passing on to them, you've got to do something about it. I can just say, though, when we talked about the police before, because let's get back to the Fracking and the quadrilla. I don't want to put it onto them at the moment because they're being used as a tool for the energy companies. Now, the point I was going to make before is if you're looking at between 6.2 million and above for just to police that one site alone. If we had a moratorium where we get all the information out there, because really we want debate, we're not bothered about debate because we know the facts and the truth against it. We'll show people every time somebody knows anything about it, about the dangers of fracking, the millions of gallons of water.
Gazer? Hey, Gazer, looks like we lost you there, my friend. Anyway, I have one more photograph of Gazer here. We have... let's try and find that. I'm still working the technology here. There we go. It's Gazer with his rocket there. He's actually taking the slower route to London. Unfortunately, we were going to get Gazer to tell us exactly where he's going to stop off on his walk. But if you go to Frack Free Filed, to the website, or to Gazer's Facebook page, or look on frackingnightmare.com tomorrow, and on that website you will see the list of Gazer's destinations. And we're going to move down to Kent after this break.
If you take an active interest in maintaining the optimum health and well-being of yourself and your family, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is the magazine you've been waiting for. Having taken Australia and New Zealand by storm, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is now available in the UK and Europe. Visit www.nznaturalmed.co.uk or call 01626 337 531 to order your copy now.
And welcome back. And we're going to move down to the southeast of the country now, and we're going to move into Kent. Now, Kent is a very interesting area. This is not technically shale gas. What is being explored for here is coal bed methane. And ostensibly, it's drilling into the old coal seams of the Kent coal mines. And this is a company called Coastal Oil and Gas. And on the screen here, you can see the petroleum exploration and development licenses there of a company called Coastal Oil and Gas. And this company has a director called Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams. He also has another company called UK Methane, which has interests in shale gas and coal bed methane in Wales and also in Somerset. He also has interests in wind farms and as well as coal. So Gerwyn certainly likes to spread his bets. Now, Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams was invited to give a talk to a public meeting in Bath earlier this year. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get along to that meeting because I was giving a public talk that night myself. But I had posed a couple of questions. Unfortunately, the people that I'd given the questions to didn't necessarily know enough to be able to challenge on the answers. But fortunately, there were one or two people there who did know enough about their subject to be able to grill Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams. But I want you to listen to this short clip that we're about to play, because in this, Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams, who, by the way, refused to allow the camera to lock onto his face, and if you actually punch Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams into a search engine, you won't find any photographs of Gerwyn. So he's quite a private man. Well, I want you to listen to what he has to say about his visit to Kent.
At a debate in Bath, UK Methane Director Gerwyn Williams sought to reassure a concerned public that the environmental incidents in the US and Australia would not be repeated.
We're under different legislation. We won't be using a load of chemicals. In the UK, we're strictly governed by the Environment Agency. I mean, when Quadrilla did frack the well in St Helens, there was one.
They only used one chemical. It's a chemical called polychloramide. That's the only chemical that they added to the fluid.
No, friends, let the speakers speak.
Can you give this room a 100% guarantee that this country's water supplies are going to be contaminated by only 4 chemicals?
I think things have moved on. Technology, with respect, I mean, we're in the industry or not. And Halliburton is one of the people that's promoting the new types of fracking fluid. And one of their executives actually drank a pint of the fracking fluid. There is no way that you're going to be allowed to use anything that can't be used in the food chain, use anything that would damage the environment.
Around about April last year, we had a drought in this area. I'd like to ask how much of our precious resource is going to be pumped into this? And also, is the water going to be usable afterwards?
I agree. We work in Kent, and they're the worst drought, you know, and we were talking to the Environment Agency and landowners about producing water for the crops. There are benefits in terms of water production if it's ever needed in this industry that are not demonstrated because, you know, we have more rainfall than anything else normally. To answer your question, we are working with a company in Newport called Syntec that will be able to sieve the water that comes back out of the wells and return that water back to the water course. So there isn't going to be a major effect in terms of water supplies. A comparison is that if you took 18,000 cubic metres of water for a frack, that is the same as is required to irrigate a 3-hectare cornfield in any one season or an 18-hole golf course in 1 month.
UK Methane to recover the amount of gas they say they can, there would need to be over 2,000 wells in Somerset alone. That's 64 billion gallons of water, or 128,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
We may be on the brink of a gas shortage, but what would we rather have, a gas shortage or a water shortage?
When you looked at the risk to radon,
Yep.
what conclusion did you reach?
Again, that's what the whole point of the exploration boreholes are for. So we need to get an understanding of what is in the ground, and until you do that, you can't assess the exact risk for the radioactive materials.
With respect, that's nonsense.
Well,
That's the answer you've had. There's a man in red over there.
Radon gas is a naturally occurring gas which is carcinogenic. If you hydraulically fracture strata at depth, there must be a strong possibility that you will increase radon generation at ground level. What is the minimum depth that the fracking will fracture if it goes ahead in the Somerset area?
If the permeability is right, we will not fracking coal. You frack for shale gas. And as I said earlier, this is a progressive process. We're drilling for coal bed methane. Once we've drilled a vertical hole and tested the coal, if there's enough gas in that coal and the permeability is right.
I understand all this. All I need is a simple depth.
It's not a simple question.
Well, just say in a range then.
It isn't a question because we wouldn't frack in coal.
I didn't say that. I said
did.
what? No, I didn't. I said what was the minimum depth you would be fracking at?
Drilling.
It depends on the depth of the shales.
Then just give me an answer.
We wouldn't necessarily hydraulically frack at shallow depths. People like Quadrilla and iGas and other people all over the country will go straight into hydraulic fracking. Okay. We have no intention of doing that. We're going to take people along with us in an open and transparent manner and show you that everything's safe in a step-by-step manner.
Could I have a depth?
Yeah.
What's that depth? I did ask what depth was the minimum depth you.
We can't tell you until we drill the exploration.
Have you no idea whatsoever? Because it doesn't look like you've done your research in very much detail if you can't give me the answer to that question.
How can you research?
So I wonder whether Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams really has been discussing with Kent farmers about using produced water from the coal bed methane operations for irrigation, because the likelihood is that that produced water is going to be saline. So I have a very strong suspicion, and I stand to be corrected, Mr. Williams, but I have a very strong suspicion that you actually made that up as you went along, assuming that your comments at a meeting in Bath would never actually reach across to Kent. The only problem for you, of course, is that we have it on video, and that clip actually appears in an absolutely stunning documentary that's been produced by a young filmmaker by the name of Marco Jackson called Fracking in the UK, The Truth Behind the Dash for Gas. Well, Gerwyn Llewellyn-Williams, I played that clip at a public meeting in Dover a couple of weeks ago, and people, unsurprisingly, were shocked. But the people in East Kent are waking up very rapidly. And in large part, that's thanks to a lady by the name of Julie Wassmer, who I met at Borkum back in August when she was letting rip against the corrupt politicians who were allowing this abomination to proceed. Now, Julie joins us from Whitstable this evening. Julie, can you hear me?
I certainly can, Ian. Thanks very much. It's a great show.
Hey, well, thanks very much for coming on. And, of course, thanks for the invitation to come down to Dover. And, of course, that public event that I spoke at, where we also had Sue Taylor from Borkum, a remarkable lady. She's been instrumental in supporting the Borkum campaign and the Borkum blockade. And, of course, she certainly doesn't conform to the Roger Helmer description of the protesters, because Sue is a chartered accountant. She's chairman of the local Women's Institute, and she is also the founder of a website called Conservatives Against Fracking. Now, you have some experience of your own Conservative MP. I think this is a guy called Charles Elphick. And actually on the screen now, I have a headline from, I think it was Charlie Elphick's own website. And this is from late September, where he says, Charlie Elphick MP and Chris Pincher MP, shale gas, good for consumers, the environment and energy security. And then literally a few days later, we see that Mr. Elphick has opposed the applications for exploratory drilling in East Kent and says he will raise the issue with ministers. Mr. Elphick went on to say, shale gas exploration offers the opportunity for lower energy bills, but I've always said we have to get the balance. We have got to balance that against safety. The risk to the water aquifer and drinking water is too great. So, Julie, can you explain to us what happened? What made Charlie Elphick do this 180 literally in the space of about 5 days?
Right, well, I must say, first of all, it isn't just me that's fighting here in East Kent. There are literally hundreds and maybe thousands by now of people that are opposing these applications. I happen to be on BBC Radio Kent news show, and Mr. Elphick on there was still being very much a proponent of the industry. But he made a few errors, really. He was confusing underground coal gasification with drilling for coal bed methane. And I felt that he really had to be called to account for this. So I wrote him a 5-page letter late on a Sunday night. To his credit, at 11:15 that Sunday night, he got back to me by email, asked for more information, and he did then go along to a campaign for the protection of rural England meeting almost the next night in Shepherdswell, one of the affected villages. 300 people went to that meeting, and Charlie Elphick was one of them. And he saw the strength of feeling about these applications, and he then began to speak out against these applications and also allowed me to send him more research. And then I had a meeting with him in Westminster on the 14th of October, 2 days before you came along to our Dover public meeting.
So I understand now that every local parish council which was being targeted by Coastal Oil and Gas has now voted against the planning applications. Is that correct?
That is exactly right. 3 affected areas here in East Kent with these applications. That's Guston, Shepherdswell, Tilmanston. But there's also the added parish council of Aythorne, which actually sits on the other side of the bridle path in Tilmanston. Now, Aythorne, I learnt just last night, has not only voted against the applications, but has started up its own campaign group and has a website as well, which is wittily called Aythorne in the Side of Drilling. So, congratulations to Aythorne. All 4 parish councils have voted against the applications, and they have been listening very clearly to their parishioners. We've got another local campaign group called Keep Shepherdswell Well. These campaign groups that have really been fighting incredibly hard here. They've been leafleting, holding meetings, they've been having workshops on how to write letters, how to phrase objections, because, of course, KCC are saying these are not applications per se for fracking. These are for exploratory drilling for coal bed methane. But it's interesting because Mr. Gerwin Llewellyn Williams, who you have introduced to everybody tonight, by way of an East Kent Against Fracking Freedom of Information request recently, we discovered he had been in correspondence with KCC since April 2012, looking for, as he put it, quote, a novel approach to avoid the need for, quote, numerous further applications. Now, this is what we're up against here, really. How do we object in a wholly relevant manner so that KCC takes these objections fully on board? And one thing I would say is we are really pleased not only to have the backing of a Conservative MP for Dover and Deal. Remember, he lives in this area too. He has a family as well, and he has listened to the very strong claims from a respected hydrogeologist, Graham D. Warren, who has said that these operations could irreversibly contaminate the aquifer that serves 70% of Kent with its water. This is a serious situation here, but we need to make Kent County Council aware of exactly what's at stake here. And we are really very grateful now that the Environment Agency wrote a letter on the 14th of October, the day of my meeting with Charlie Elphick in Westminster, asking for KCC to go back to Coastal Oil and Gas for more information on how they are going to protect the groundwater here. So we now have a complete delay. What was going to be a final deadline...
Just 15 seconds, Julie.
Okay, of 6th of October, we have now pushed this process right back till 2014, and that's a success at the moment. We haven't won the war, but we're certainly winning the battles. And if we want to be part of the victory, we've all got to be part of the fight. The people of East Kent are really fighting hard to keep East Kent frack free.
Excellent. Well, Julie, obviously you've bought yourselves a bit of time there. And of course, I mean, let's acknowledge as well that the reason the whole country has a little bit more time is due to the phenomenal success of the Balkan blockade. Certainly when I started touring the country in February with the Fractured Future Tour, I was stating that we had maybe 6 months before the first frack got underway. But because that was delayed at Balkan, we're not going to see any fracking in this country till early 2014 at the earliest. And hopefully that gives us even more time now to build upon what you guys are doing in East Kent and the other groups are doing elsewhere in the country. And as we're going to see in part 3, the next area of the country that is going to be under primary attack is back in the desolate northwest. So, Julie, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. One point I would make is I think we have to be very, very careful about MPs who state that they support the local community in their fight against the frackers, but still support the party policy of development of shale gas and coal bed methane, because they're hoping that this is a get out of jail free card so that they can get re-elected, but then still obviously hold the party whip. So I think, one of the things that we have to be very careful of is making sure that these MPs understand that it doesn't matter which party they are. If they support fracking, then they ain't going to get re-elected, period.
Absolutely, Ian. But you know what? Even Michael Fallon, the energy minister, is playing that card too. He spoke recently in the Telegraph about MPs not being picky, not rejecting applications on their own patch. But in the Sevenoaks Chronicle, he said that he would support his own constituents against a planning application they didn't want. So you're quite right. But I remember Sue saying at our public meeting, she would rather have had her MP, Francis Maud, objecting to those applications in Balkan than standing aside and allowing Balkan to happen.
I think the reality is that ultimately what we're seeing is that the local MPs actually don't have any real say in this whatsoever, and it's time for the people to actually get back involved. Julie, we got to say goodbye there. Thank you so much for everything, and I know that we will speak again very soon, and good luck with everything you're doing in East Kent.
Thank you so much, Ian, and to everyone there. Cheers.
Thank you, Julie. Take care now. Right, we're going to take another short break, get a couple of things set up, and then we're going to move back into the not-so-desolate northwest.
If you take an active interest in maintaining the optimum health and well-being of yourself and your family, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is the magazine you've been waiting for. Having taken Australia and New Zealand by storm, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is now available in the UK and Europe. Visit www.nznaturalmed.co.uk or call 01626 337 531 to order your copy now.
And welcome back to part 3. Well, as is always the case, the time flies by when you're having fun, and a few technical hitches just to keep you on your toes. So we've started the show with Gazer Frackman and his experiences in the Fylde Peninsula when Quadrilla, chaired by Lord John Brown, drilled and fracked in the northwest and caused some damage to Gazer's home, along with a number of other homes in the area. Then we moved across to East Kent, which is being targeted by coastal oil and gas. But now we're going to go back to the northwest, and we're going to go and take a look at what's going on in a suburb of Manchester. This is actually in Lancashire, just across the border from Cheshire. And if we can actually look at the screen here, what we're looking at there in the centre of the screen is a place called Barton Moss, which lies between Earlham and Eccles, and it lies right alongside the M62 and just about half a mile to the northwest of the A57. And right alongside it is the Barton Aerodrome, which is just a light aircraft aerodrome. Well, this is part of a larger petroleum exploration and development license, which is held by iGas. This is iGas Energy. Chairman of this company is a gentleman by the name of Andrew Austin. Now, earlier this year in April, Andrew Austin went touting for new investors and hit the media in April claiming that shale gas was going to be the next revolution and iGas was going to be at the heart of it. And he was very successful because in the space of just a few weeks, he managed to lift the iGas stock from the doldrums of below 70, I believe it's 70 pence, and then took it actually up to nearly 120. So clearly, there are investors who believe that the shale gas agenda and coal bed methane agenda in this country is going to kick off. And in fact, iGas Energy held a public meeting, and I went to that public meeting in September, and this is the lovely brochure that they produced. See how nice and green it is, and how community friendly they are with all of the community projects they have. iGas in the community. So let iGas build your village hall, your children's playground, or provide the soccer pitch, and drill underneath and poison you. Well, they are claiming, of course, that they are only drilling into the coal bed methane, into the coal seams that lie around about 5,000 feet or so below Barton Moss. But in reality, they're actually going to be drilling a little bit deeper than that, as it shows quite clearly on this page here. So iGas Energy are going to spend an additional £1.5 million to drill another 5,000 feet below the coal seams into the shale. So the reality is, Mr. Austin, that we know very well that the real target is the shale deposits, because that's where you know the mother lode is, and that's what you've been telling your investors. And what you're telling the local community is that the real target is just the coal seams. So you're not, of course, lying, you're just being a little economic with the truth. But I'm pleased to say that there are people in the Greater Manchester area that are catching on very fast. And to quote, there are people in Manchester, and this must be a local term because it's not one I recognise, but there are people in Manchester right now who are working their tits and bollocks off to raise awareness amongst the local community. I guess that's local vernacular. Well, as you can see from this particular map, then iGas has some interest. All of the purple squares there are iGas Energy. So their little drilling exploration expedition at Barton Moss is just the start of things to come. Now, I went up to Barton Moss a couple of weeks ago, and this was what I was met with. I'd been there shortly after I attended the public meeting, and the green gates weren't there. There was just the outer gates. So behind the green gates, what you see there are all of these concrete-mounted scaffold poles, and clearly they are there for the defences that iGas are building. And here we are, another one there of the fortifications that they're building there. And then I was met by the iGas security guard. Now, this gentleman, I must assume, was probably off sick on the day that the company, Uniquin, were running their workshop on basic human communication skills. Because instead of, "Good afternoon, sir, how can I help you?" I got, "What the fuck do you want?" Well, this gentleman was clearly briefed that there might be a few visitors coming along and was very keen to get my name. I unfortunately had an attack of dementia and couldn't remember it, so he didn't get that from me. And then he wanted to take my car number. Well, you know, I have nothing to hide whatsoever. And if, in fact, if you search the web, then you'll find plenty on me. Well, let's have a look at this other next slide here, because what we have here is the fences that have been put up across the motorway bridge. Now, this site at Barton sits about half a mile from the main road. It's up a private road, as we see here, with a weight limit of 16 tonnes. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they actually get their rig in there. And obviously, the police are determined to ensure that nobody accidentally falls off the bridge at any point. So they have carefully tied the fencing to the bridge. Now that looks like a perfect location for a few banners there across the M62. Now, meanwhile, of course, the people in the area, they're all on the lookout for this. This is the rig truck. This is the rig, the first stage of the quadrilla rig that arrived in Borkum on the Tuesday. I think it was July 23rd or thereabouts. And this is what triggered the Borkum blockade. On the second day, the second delivery of the rig arrived, and something happened to the brakes on that truck, and it got stuck outside the gate for 5 hours, blocking the road. Thus the start of the Borkum blockade. Now, the people of Barton Moss, just like in Kent, they have the support of their MP, Barbara Keeley. And earlier in the year, Barbara stated categorically that she will oppose any proposals for fracking in Earlham. Well, just like Charlie Elphick and Barbara, what you're going to learn is that the government and indeed your party leaders really don't care what you think. In fact, the strategy is for people to tell their constituents whatever it is they need to tell them, but at the same time, the party are still going to support the agenda. Well, I'm pleased to say that there's at least one of the parties that's now has its leadership under some pressure. It's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but there is a growing movement amongst the grassroots of UKIP to challenge the leadership who are pro-fracking. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. Now, I think that Barton Moss might not necessarily be in Thompson's holiday guide, but I think it's probably a pretty good place to camp at winter. So sometime in the next few days, weeks maybe, as IGAS start to ramp up the defences that they're putting around that site, I think it's time for people to move into that area and start watching a little bit more closely as to what's going on. And over the winter months, I think there's going to be quite a growing community there. Meanwhile, if you live within any commuting distance of the Greater Manchester area, then there are people there who need a lot of help because they're working their tits and bollocks off to raise local awareness, and they need a lot of help to do that. So if you are in the area, there's a public meeting coming up. And that meeting is at the Green Fish Resource Centre, 46 to 50 Oldham Street, Manchester, M41LE. I'm sure there will be somebody in the appropriate attire representing IGAS. You might not recognise them, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that they will be there. But you know what, IGAS? We have absolutely nothing to hide. And you are very welcome to come along. I was expecting to actually have the opportunity to meet with Andrew Austin when I attended the public meeting at Salford Stadium in September. Francis Egan at least had the cojones to come out in person. And Francis Egan is a very personable guy. Have a nice conversation. But of course, we totally disagree on the core issue, which is his agenda to frack the not-so-desolate northwest, or even the southeast. So if you can get along to the Barton Moss meeting, then you will be made more than welcome. And if you have a particular skill or expertise or a particular interest that you can share with the group there, then you will be embraced with open arms. Now, synchronistically, earlier today, I happened to be on the dreaded CIA book, and who should come up but one of my former oilfield colleagues who I haven't seen since I left the Middle East in 1993. And during the course of that conversation, he made a very, very interesting observation. He was actually acknowledging that what I was doing was perhaps necessary, even though he still has a vested interest in the oil industry. There are many people in the oil industry who do understand that the fracking agenda is an abomination. This is what he said to me. He said, water is the lifeline, and water is going to be more expensive than oil soon. Water conservation, storage, and water-related businesses will gain more importance very soon. I think this is something that we should certainly take account of. And if people haven't seen Peter Brabeck's interview from 2005, Peter Brabeck, the chairman and chief executive officer of Nestle, he's subsequently retired, But in that interview, he stated categorically that it was his opinion that access to fresh water should not be regarded as a human right. Basically, what he was saying was that if you want access to fresh water, you need to be on a corporate payroll. You need to be a corporate slave. And although he didn't say it, what he was really, of course, alluding to was that if you are one of Henry Kissinger's useless eaters, then basically, and you're not making a contribution to the corporate agenda, then you might as well slip off this mortal coil. And if you don't do it quick enough, then they'll help you by denying your access to fresh water. This abomination is sucking the Great Lakes of the US, the Great River System of the US, the aquifers of the Western United States. It's sucking them dry. In Australia, the fracking activities in Queensland are sucking the Great Artesian Basin dry at a rate greater than it can naturally replenish. This is an absolute abomination. Where we are ultimately heading, and I think the Sun actually captured this inadvertently, perhaps, just a few days ago when they said breathing air is bad for your health. I know it sounds outrageous. If you'd have said to any Irish citizen 10 years ago they would have to pay for their water, they would have laughed at you, because embedded in the Irish psyche is the fact that water is provided by the state. If this agenda is permitted to kick off, not only will we be paying outrageous sums of money for water, but it is entirely possible that if we want to breathe fresh air in our homes, we will have to pay for it. It will be metered. Possibly not in my lifetime, but in the lifetime of our children and our grandchildren. And so even if you're not interested in this for your own sake, consider the legacy that we're leaving our children and grandchildren. Now, there is a superb documentary that is hot off the press. This is a documentary by a young filmmaker by the name of Marco Jackson. Marco came along to one of my very first Fractured Future presentations in Glastonbury in February of this year, and decided that he wanted to make a documentary on the subject. He's put together an absolutely outstanding documentary. It runs for 1 hour, and you can see the link to this on www.frackingnightmare.com. Over the next couple of weeks, I have some public events coming up. I will be in Hove on this coming Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the All Saints Parish Hall, Eaton Road, Hove. And then the week after, I'm in Wimborne. And in fact, on next week's show, we're going to be taking a little bit of a deeper look at what's going on in the Purbex, because the Purbex are a prime target for the frackers. Now, next week, we're going to move across to Australia, and we're going to meet with Brian Monk, who is a farmer in southern Queensland. And Brian has the misfortune to be living above the gas fields of southern Queensland. Now, we're going to close out tonight with a short video from southern Queensland. It's an animation that's been put together by Barry Monk. And this looks at an area that is approximately the size of the UK. Queensland itself is 7 times the size of England. Sorry, of the UK even. The population of the UK is 100 times denser than the population of Queensland. And in this video, what you're going to see is the spread of the gas industry in the space of literally just 5 years. So thank you for joining with us tonight. I'm going to cue you out with the gas industry in southern Queensland. Thank you for joining us. See you next Monday, 9 o'clock.
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find the common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya Gas Fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Catewell cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Williambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country. So where are